84% of people on Earth believe in God or a higher power. That's 6.7 billion humans across every continent, every culture, every language, many of whom have never met each other, never shared a text, never attended the same church. The question isn't whether religion is true or false. The question nobody asks is this: why did every single human civilization on Earth, independently, with zero contact, arrive at the exact same idea? The answer has nothing to do with the divine. It has everything to do with survival. Let's start with the brain. Not the brain you use to scroll, to type, to read. The brain your ancestors used 300,000 years ago. It looked identical to yours. Same weight, same structure, same wiring. But it lived in a world with no explanations for anything. Lightning struck a tree and the forest burned. A healthy child died in the night. The river flooded and destroyed everything. Earthquakes split the ground open without warning. Your ancestor's brain experienced all of this and did something it was never supposed to stop doing. It looked for a cause. Anthropologists call it agent detection. Your brain is hardwired to find intent behind events. If something moves in the grass, your brain doesn't wait to confirm whether it's the wind or a predator. It assumes predator. It assumes something with a will, a goal, a reason for moving. This wasn't a flaw. This was the feature that kept your ancestors alive. The ones who assumed nothing and waited to check were eaten. The ones who assumed something was there and ran survived. Over millions of years, that assumption instinct got stronger and stronger. And then something went wrong. Agent detection is brilliant when the threat is real. It becomes dangerous when the brain applies it to everything. Thunder isn't a predator, but your ancestor's brain didn't know that. It heard the sound, registered the danger, and looked for the agent behind it. Something made that noise. Something enormous and invisible and powerful. Something that needed to be understood. Something that, if you were smart, needed to be appeased. This is where God begins. Not in a moment of spiritual awakening, in a moment of pure terror and a brain desperately trying to survive it. In 2008, archaeologists excavating a cave in Botswana made a discovery that stopped them completely. Hidden inside the rock, roughly 70,000 years old, was a carved python. 6 meters long, deliberately shaped from the cave wall. Around it were hundreds of stone spearheads. Not hunting tools, not everyday weapons. They were too carefully made, too precisely placed, too deliberately arranged to be practical. They were offerings. This python wasn't food, it was being worshipped. This is the oldest evidence of ritual behavior ever found. 70,000 years before the first pyramid, before the first written prayer, before any religion anyone today would recognize, someone crawled into that dark cave and made something sacred. But why a python? Why any animal? The answer is control. Ancient humans had almost none. You couldn't predict the rain. You couldn't guarantee the hunt. You couldn't stop disease or drought or disaster. What you could do was perform a ritual, offer something, follow a rule. And if the hunt succeeded the next morning, and sometimes it did, your brain made the connection. The ritual worked. The pattern was real. And once that connection formed, it was almost impossible to break. Psychologists call this illusory correlation. Two events happen close together, and the human brain links them as cause and effect, even when no real connection exists. You wore a specific necklace the day the hunt succeeded. You said a specific phrase before the river rose. Your brain doesn't care that these things are unrelated. It files them as connected, as meaningful, as rules for survival. Repeat them and live. Break them and risk death. Over thousands of generations, those rules compounded into rituals. Those rituals compounded into stories. Those stories compounded into gods. But here is what makes this genuinely remarkable. It didn't happen once, it happened everywhere. The ancient Mesopotamians believed a storm god named Enlil controlled the wind and rain. The ancient Greeks had Zeus throwing lightning from the sky. The ancient Hindus had Indra, also a storm god, also throwing lightning. The ancient Norse had Thor. The ancient Slavs had Perun. The ancient Aztecs had Tlaloc. Completely separate civilizations, zero contact with each other, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all arriving at the same conclusion. Something powerful and invisible is controlling the weather, and it looks like a person. The reason is agent detection again. When your brain searches for the cause of thunder, it doesn't imagine a force or a mechanism. It imagines a being, a will, a personality. Because every cause your ancestor ever witnessed in their actual life had a face. Animals acted with intention. Humans acted with intention. Even rivals acted with intention. The brain had no template for a cause that wasn't a someone. So when it needed to explain the unexplainable, it invented a someone. And it made that someone powerful enough to explain everything it couldn't. Now here's the part that changes how you see all of this. In 1965, anthropologist Roy Rappaport spent a year living with the Tsembaga people of Papua New Guinea. He documented something extraordinary. Their entire agricultural cycle, when to plant, when to harvest, when to rest the land, was governed by religious ritual. Specifically, a pig sacrifice festival that happened roughly every 12 years. The timing seemed random. It wasn't. The festival occurred when the pig population grew large enough to damage the gardens. Killing and eating the pigs at the festival reset the population. The land recovered. The people survived. The god didn't tell them to do this. The ritual encoded what 2,000 years of trial and error had already figured out. The religion was a filing system for survival knowledge that the community had no other way to store or transmit. Follow the ritual, survive. Break the ritual, die. The belief that something sacred commanded it simply made sure nobody broke it. This is what religion actually was in its earliest form. Not superstition, not ignorance, a technology, a system for encoding the rules that kept a community alive and binding every member to follow them, whether they understood the reason or not. You don't need to know why you shouldn't eat a specific animal if your god has forbidden it. You just don't eat it. And sometimes that prohibition exists because that animal carries a disease. And the community that kept the rule survived. And the community that broke it didn't. There was one more thing religion did that nothing else could. It made strangers cooperate. A hunter-gatherer group of 50 people doesn't need God. Everyone knows everyone. Trust is built through direct experience. But when human settlements grew, when hundreds, then thousands of strangers began living together, something new was needed. You can't personally verify whether every person in a city of 10,000 is trustworthy. But if everyone in that city believes the same God is watching, that the same sacred rules apply to all of them, that breaking those rules brings divine punishment, suddenly cooperation at scale becomes possible. Suddenly, you can build a granary together, divide labor, create law, expand. Historian Yuval Noah Harari argues that shared myths are the single most powerful technology humans ever invented. Not fire, not the wheel, not writing. The ability to make thousands of strangers believe in the same invisible story and act accordingly. Every empire, every legal system, every currency ever created runs on exactly this technology. And it all traces back to a terrified ancestor in the dark, watching something die, asking why, and deciding that something with a will must be responsible. Your brain still runs that same software. Every time something bad happens without explanation, the same ancient system activates. The same search for cause, for intent, for meaning. You feel it when a flight crashes and someone asks why God allowed it. You feel it when a child gets sick and a family prays. You feel it when an athlete points at the sky after a goal. The hardware is 300,000 years old. It was built for a world of predators and darkness and rain you couldn't predict. We built cities around it. We wrote books around it. We fought wars around it. We organized entire civilizations around a feeling your ancestor had when they couldn't explain why someone died. Whether that makes religion true or false is a question for philosophers and theologians. But where it came from, that answer belongs to survival. And a brain so desperate to find meaning in chaos that it invented the divine rather than accept that sometimes things just happen. That instinct saved us, and we never stopped using it. For tens of thousands of years, humans have searched for answers to the same questions. Why are we here? What controls our world? And what happens when we die? Whether those answers came from gods, myths, science, or philosophy, the search itself is what makes us human. This video explored one scientific perspective on how religious belief may have emerged throughout human history. It is not intended to challenge or promote any particular faith, but to examine the evolutionary, psychological, and anthropological forces that shaped human civilization. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this doodlecast, consider subscribing for more videos exploring history, science, psychology,